Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Dropping Down from the Rafters podcast here on Tone In Entertainment. I just love doing these podcasts, but especially when it's like we get not only like a very special guest, but I also get my co-host back for this week, Julie Cutler. How you doing, Julie?
I'm back. Thank you so much, Tony, for having me. I feel like it has been a little while since we've been able to do one of these, so I'm glad to be back. I love your new background, by the way.
Yes, I was in Miami the last time, and now I'm not. So some similarities, but a little bit different. Yes,
similarities, but it's a fresh take on an old classic. I really like it.
I like that.
And I'm super excited because we have a very special guest today who is somebody that I have been admiring on social media for quite some time. Someone whose words of advice I love to read and listen to. And so I'm very grateful to have him on the show today because I think we're going to have a lot of really good stuff to talk about. So if I may... Hailing from the 5th floor of the last house on the left, weighing in at 235 pounds, he is the Messiah of old school, Shawn Donavan!
I think I just found my personal new ring announcer that I must have on every show. Thank you very much for that introduction. That's really cool. That's very, very good. I enjoy that. I enjoy those who take pride in the work that they want to put in.
Well, you're very welcome. And like I said, we're really excited to have you on the show today. I know I've been following you on social media for quite some time, and you have...
Sorry to hear that.
Well, you have... I really enjoy it because you have a lot of experience in the business, and there's a lot of, like I said, little pieces of advice and wisdom that you share that as someone who is really only maybe 2 years, not even in at this point, I really like to listen to what you have to say and pick the brains of those who came before me that have a lot more info than I do. So if you don't mind, I'd like to go way back to the beginning and just kind of jump in with a classic question of sort of how you got involved in wrestling in the first place, where you started, where you trained, what was your inspiration to take this on?
Yeah, so for me, and I date my age, so to speak, I go all the way back to when I first started wrestling, watching wrestling when I was a kid. It was really during the early to, transition to mid 80s. My grandfather and my family had immigrated here from Italy. So at that time, the very big I guess if you want to call it ambassador for Italy when it comes to sports and wrestling was Bruno Sammartino. My grandfather, would watch it religiously on TV. And, I say this a lot of times. I remember plain as day. I don't even know how I do, but I remember this plain as day at 5 years old, watching with my grandfather or just listening with my grandfather. And I was just captivated as he was yelling at the TV. And I remember the match itself. It was from Madison Square Garden. It was Baron Miguel Cicluna against SD Jones. And I don't know what it was about that match. I really don't. But I just gravitated towards the TV. And I just could not understand why these people were all in an arena and why these people were just clamoring for these two individuals. And, my grandfather passed away shortly after that. He died, unfortunately, very young. But what came from that was me loving and watching professional wrestling. And not one of those kids that may have taken a break from it. I was immersed in it my entire childhood. There were times where, go out with your friends and play. Nope. I need to be in front of the TV watching wrestling 24/7. And I was lucky enough to be able to have WWF on my TV. I was lucky enough to be able to even in the transition, have NWA transition into WCW on my TV. And sure as day, Saturdays at 12 o'clock, I'm in front of the TV watching WWF Superstars. I would find a way to be sick because my parents were very into, and not that we'll go there, but I was raised Catholic, so my parents would want to go to church, but 6:05 on the Superstation came on, had to be in front of the TV watching WCW, and it just steamrolled from there. And where I really got into the industry is kind of by luck in a way, but I always say things happen in life for a reason. At the time, he is now my brother-in-law, but at the time, my sister was dating this gentleman whose brother was a very big sports and wrestling fanatic. And I never knew there was such a thing as independent wrestling. And about mid 90s, 95, 96, I would go to sporting conventions and I would always collected comic books and sports cards. And now all of a sudden I'm at these wrestling conventions that were very big in the 90s, meeting all these people that I grew up watching. And my brother-in-law's brother at the time was very good friends with a gentleman who ran one of the very first and only independent wrestling hotlines. And again, we're talking 1990s. There is no internet. And his name was Brett Schwann. And he was actually very good friends with Chris Candido and Tammy Sitch, and knew a lot of people from ECW and guys that had come up in the New Jersey, New York independent wrestling scene. And through going to these conventions, there was one convention in particular that ran, and the person who ran them is a gentleman by the name of Tommy Fierro. If anybody knows the name, he has a store in New Jersey. He is the gentleman that has ran the company ISPW for many, many years. He started out running conventions and then ran shows in the late 90s. But one of his conventions led me to hearing about a wrestling company by the name of IWF. And I started going to their shows. They would run out of South Plainfield, New Jersey. I apologize, it's long-winded, but it leads to where it needs to go to. But through there was a promoter that helped run IWF by the name of AJ Sparks, was the character name. And they had a school in West Paterson, New Jersey. So I decided to go check it out. I walk in the front door and I see Simon Diamond, Dawn Marie, and they're trying to, AJ's trying to sell me on the school and whatnot. And I'm going to college at that time. I don't have a lot of money, working a couple jobs, trying to pay my college tuition, and just did not have the money at the time. And this is early 2000. Fast forward, I started continuing to go to those shows again. And the one show I happened to be at, they announced that at their school, they were going to do a 1-day fantasy camp. They were only going to take on so many people. And the winner of that, or the not winner, but the person who did the best would be offered free training. I said, okay, this is my in. Okay. I'm also at that point, I've never worked out in my life. I'm, wrestling fan, but I really never played sports. I played basketball, but not to that level. But so I signed up for it. I figured, hey, I've watched this enough. It's kind of got to be easy, right? It was not easy at all. But I think by watching it for as long as I did, I developed some understanding of how you fall, maybe how you hit the ropes, or maybe it was just pure love. But I went through this 1-day fantasy camp that was about 5 or 6 hours. Unfortunately, I did not win. But the promoter, AJ, came up to me and said, hey, as he did with everybody, I'm sorry, you guys didn't win. But he came up to me and he said, hey, I'm sorry you weren't selected as the one for free training, but we felt that you were the close second. And he said, I can't offer you free training, but I can offer you half the tuition. I just cut him a check right there for a deposit. I didn't even probably have the amount of money in the bank account. But I just figured, hey, I'll just work extra hours that week, until I did it. And he got me on a tuition schedule. And that was literally the start. I started in May of 2001 with IWF. My original head trainer was a local journeyman by the name of Kevin Knight, who ran shows around the northern New Jersey area. And then my second coach, who is still a mentor to me to this day, is a local journeyman in New Jersey by the name of Biggie Biggs. Was all across the East Coast. And through there is really where I just cut my teeth in that training. So I have an akin, and maybe we'll get to this at this point, kind of a full circle moment, being able to work with Tommy Fierro on his shows and being able to have those full circle moments with people that kind of got me where I needed to be. And I always say, if I never met my brother-in-law's brother, I never went to that convention, would life have gone differently? So I'm a very big believer in life that things happen in life for a reason. So that is pretty much where I got my start and where I cut my teeth in my early days of training.
There was definitely a lot of nuggets in there that I definitely want to circle back to at
Please
some
do.
point. Yes, but two little quick snippets in there that I think are pretty good, because you dated yourself, so I could date myself, because I might be still just a little bit younger than you, but you mentioned writing the checks. And I
Yeah.
remember, as a late teenager, early 20s, you'd write a check, and then you always knew you had maybe 5 days to get a little bit more money into that bank account.
Exactly why I cut the deposit check that day.
Exactly. Yep. So cut it and then try to figure out a way to get some more money in. And then you also mentioned that you were raised Catholic, the same as I was too. And my dad was obsessed with professional wrestling. That's how I got into watching it. And you said 6:05, and we made a deal with my mom that if we went to church at 5 p.m. on Saturday, it would be over by 6, and it was only a 5-minute drive home, and we could be home so my dad could have dinner ready for us to watch WCW at 6:05 on Saturday night.
Yeah, I never got that luxury because there was only so many Saturdays I could possibly be legitimately sick. But the good part is, and again, I date myself, we had VCRs. So I would just set the timer to record. And it was very, very big for me because that was also in the coming days and age of ECW on MSG Network that would sometimes air at 1 a.m. So I would set my VCR for that. And then there were times that, it was supposed to air, but it never did. So then when I would watch it on Sunday morning, it's wait, where's the show? It's not even on. Okay, I got to wait another week. So, it brings me back to that, but it just kind of brings me back to that absolute love of this industry that is just so unique and so special and unlike any other form of entertainment.
Rewind 89 says he loves himself some ECW Taz. That was his first real crush.
Yeah, you know what? Taz was one of my favorites, but I really, when I watched ECW and going back to understand how those programs were so different and developed now and what they were legitimately just a 60-minute infomercial for you to buy the actual VHS tape of the show, whether it was Heatwave 96, Hardcore Heaven, or whatnot, but it was so brilliantly done and so different at a time when there was no really such thing as copyright infringement. But it was just such a different, in your face, unique look at wrestling than what I was really exposed to, which at that time was that kind of cartoonish WWF and to a degree WCW at that time. But it was really such a unique time in the industry that a lot of young performers or even fans today will not be able to appreciate, and not in a negative way. It's just a different time, right? you had Nitro and you had Raw on at the same time. So which one do you watch? And for me, um, I always recorded Raw and watched Nitro. So as soon as Nitro was over, the VHS tape is ready to go. I'm literally every Monday watching 5 hours of wrestling, knowing I probably had homework to do, a test to study for. I just didn't care. But that's just the way life was at that point. But yeah, that was how I kind of got into the industry and cut my teeth very early on.
So something that I wanted to ask, because you had mentioned very briefly, just in some of the last things that you had said, you'd mentioned young performers today and kind of
Hmm.
growing up in a different time, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just like a
No,
different way of the world.
correct.
So I kind of wanted to circle back when you were talking about breaking into the business, your early days in the business as an
Hmm.
independent wrestler. Are there any sort of like challenges that you faced, things that you learned along the way that maybe you see as like common reoccurring themes amongst like young up and coming talent today
Yep.
that you would use your experience to give some advice to like
Yes.
do this differently or don't do this or
Yeah, the biggest thing, and I actually teach this to my students. I think as we all grow as individuals, right, and in any area of business or life, we learn what not to do and what to do. For me, early on, the biggest mistake that I made was I didn't get out of that bubble soon enough than I should have. And we all tend to believe that the individuals guiding us do have our best interests at heart because we're young, we're naive, we don't know any better. I think I stuck around that bubble of just working for that place that I grew up in because it was the place that gave me the opportunity, so I felt like I owed it back to them. But at the same token, I got very lucky early with my training, and I was very lucky enough to have the right people training me, where sometimes individuals who want to get into the industry don't have necessarily that level. When I have somebody like Journeyman, like Biggie Biggs, who had been around since the early 90s and worked with everybody, he came from the Monster Factory. He trained with guys like Nova and all these other guys that really went to different places, and then having the ability, and we can touch on it, of having guys like Balls Mahoney and Chris Candido just pop up at the school on a monthly basis and give us their knowledge, and being able to have a connection with WWE so early on, and having Dr. Tom Pritchard, who at that time was the head of developmental, scouting a lot of places in the Northeast, including our school. Yes, you're going to believe that you quote unquote don't need to go anywhere else, when in reality, yes, you have to get out there and you have to experience the world of pro wrestling. I always say to young talent, if you're at a school and your coach or trainer is not pushing you to leave the nest and go train and go do all these other things, they're doing you a disservice. Eventually, I broke through that mold, I broke through that bubble and got out there and I traveled. And I even tell my students today, go train with this person for a little bit. Go here, go learn this style. This is still your home school, but the more knowledge you learn from everybody, the more it's going to help formulate what your style is. So I tell young performers, go out there and learn. There's so many places, especially within the New England and Northeast area, because if you go from the top of New England all the way to like the end where like Delaware is, you can get to, I think, like 8 different states within a span of like 8 or 9 hours. There's so much to learn. As a coach and being able to network with different people and having relationships. For example, before they were ID'd by WWE, I was in contact with Mike Hollow because I had learned from Mike Hollow when I would do the early days of chaotic wrestling when he was the head trainer of the Kowalski School, and I would have matches there. And I would walk through the curtain and he would give that feedback. He would invite us to stay, and we would go to their school the next day on a Sunday or a Saturday and train for like 6 hours. So I've sent my students up to his school whenever he's invited my guys when he's had free weekend trainings because I know how much of a fundamentals master Mike is. Then I tell my guys, go to Worldwide Dojo with Cheeseburger, who is literally a lucha and everything master. His experience in Ring of Honor and internationally. So I tell young guys, don't just learn what you're learning at your home school. Go everywhere and learn because there is so much knowledge out there. And it may not necessarily be your flavor, but you might work a cheeseburger one day. And if you know some of his style, there's magic to be made within your own flavor, working with somebody like them and knowing how to put a story together. We're all about learning in this industry, and the more you learn, the better off you'll be. If you tend to become very close-minded and just think this is the only style you want to wrestle, you're only going to be pigeonholed to a certain area and a certain style that you're only going to go so far.
Mm. Shawn, you posted on Facebook yesterday, and I'm going to bring up this picture right there.
I had a nice head of hair.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. I mean, your hair still looks lovely right now too. But you posted yesterday, 23 years yesterday since you started the business. So
yeah, well, it was actually 23 years of my first match.
Oh, from your first match.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yep.
So if you had to tell that youngster right there that we saw on screen a little bit of advice, maybe the hardest lesson that you've learned in your journey, maybe not to make a mess up along the way, what would you tell them?
Don't do it.
Don't do what? The wrestling?
No. I think the biggest advice I would give me back then, don't let people tell you this is not your dream. I made that mistake at one point in my life, which even though I stayed involved, took a few years of in-ring work away from me. I look, life is life, right? Life is going to take us in different directions. If you are going to be involved in relationships, make sure they are with people that support your journey in anything you do. I, at that time, very early on, still struggled with self-confidence within myself because, and I've said this in other interviews, I don't mind saying it, I grew up as the overweight kid that was bullied beyond belief. So even though I was able to get involved in wrestling and be in a safe space, personally, I didn't have that confidence. So I let an individual basically tell me that what I was doing was just a hobby and not realistic. I tell people if you don't have people helping you shoot for the moon, they are not right for your life. So if I could go back and tell myself that, that's the advice I would give. Don't listen to the naysayers. Look, we're all going to have people that, and let's face it, our industry is very unique. To people who don't understand wrestling, they're never going to truly understand it. At least get with people that respect what your journey is. Have fun with it. But I say this to a lot of students now and even young performers when it comes to making a decision of how far you want to chase this, right? Coaching for so long, I have narrowed it down that there are two types of individuals who walk into a wrestling school. Number one, it's your dream. Because, like anything in life, if it's your dream, you're going to chase it to its fullest extent. The other end is it's something cool I want to try. And while that's good, there are a small percentage of those that think it's cool and want to try it that actually excel. but a lot of people who think something is cool to try, eventually the level of ability trying it starts to fade away and they don't end up putting their full weight and effort into it. So when I talk to young performers or prospects who may think of joining our school or any school, I always try to ask them that question to help try to guide them, to help them make the best decision possible. Because the last thing I want to see is someone invest that money into training into a good school and not follow through.
That's really great advice. I do want to touch on something real quick there because it comes from an interview I just did this past week. I'm going to be dropping it this week with a wrestler. He wrestles up north sometimes too. Teriyaki. He a little spoiler because the interview hasn't dropped yet. But he said that in his interview that no, this is his plan A and he has no plan B. And it really resonated with me because about 3 years ago, Sky Blue, when I interviewed her before she made her debut on AEW, she said the exact same thing. And like you could tell her focus was there. And now she has made that plan A her plan A. And I don't see her having having to have a plan B moving forward. So if somebody comes to you with that much confidence that this is their plan A, do you get a little worried or are you just maybe even more invested in them? How do you take that?
It depends because, and again, I say this wholeheartedly, right? I have seen individuals come through our school who have said this was their dream. And once they realized how much effort and work it takes, I hate to say it, some individuals just do not have the mental aptitude to really immerse themselves in this. I don't disagree that if you only have a plan A, go for it, because if it really is the only plan you have, that kind of equates to this is your dream and you're going to do anything that it takes to make it. The thing I look at today is how I also looked at it back then too, right? When I told my family this was what I was going to do, my family said, go for it, chase it. Just make sure you have a backup plan because there are thousands of wrestlers out there, but there's only so many places to go, right? Not everybody is unfortunately going to make it to the dance. That's just reality. For me, the way I looked at it was I'm going to chase this to my fullest potential, but I want to make sure that if for any reason this doesn't work out, I have a fallback plan so that I can still be involved in it, but it just may not be what is going to be my main source of income. So I can see it from both sides. I don't ever try to tell people how to live their life, but if they are going to say, this is my only plan A, then all I can do is help guide them and give them advice to help them do everything they can to achieve that plan A becoming a reality.
Shawn, something that I wanted to circle back to, something that you said that really resonated with me personally. You talked about just having supportive people in your life, and you mentioned, some people that aren't in the business, that aren't wrestling fans. Sometimes it's difficult for them to understand this world. When it comes to other people in the business, potentially not being supportive or not believing in your abilities, not believing that you have the mental aptitude to make it, how do you deal with those kinds of situations? Because I know that I've personally been I've had some experiences like that, and it was kind of a double-edged sword in the sense that on one hand, it's not something that you want to hear, but then on the other hand, I felt like I want to, prove the naysayers so wrong that it gave me the fuel to be like, okay, I'm going to crank out interviews. I'm going to start going out and reaching out to new promotions. And I feel like I was actually very productive as a result. So I guess, have you encountered any situations like that over the years? And what words of wisdom do you have to people in terms of sort of how to navigate that and come out better for it?
Yeah, I don't necessarily. I mean, I've had many instances of that, right? You're always going to have naysayers out there, and there's always going to be the negative Nancy's, if you want to call them that, right? To me, as I've evolved in this industry or even in life, I always say the haters are always the loudest because those are the ones that are not putting in the actual work or the effort. So it's just easy for them to just armchair quarterback and say that, oh, well, you're probably not going to make it either, right? To what I say to that is, and this has just been me, and not that I'm going in a different direction here, right? We all know in any type of business, there's always a certain level of politicking that happens, right? I've never been one to politic because number one, I don't like it. Number two, I'm not really that good at it because for me, in any job I've ever had, or even in wrestling, I've always been of the belief show people what you can do. If you can put in that work and you can put in that effort and you can own your craft, eventually you're going to start making your way because you're going to find a way to separate yourself from everybody else, right? When I look at wrestling today, and the equate that I would way I would equate it is we see a lot of highlight reels from performers today, right? And within those highlight reels are always the same moves. Nothing really stands out. Now, if you go on a different path and start creating vignettes for yourself as a persona and letting people know what you're about, or doing more promos, letting people know that you're building stories with your character, and then that translates to the work you're doing in the ring. The society that we're in today, and being such a socially a social media driven society, content is everything today, but it's how you put that content out there that is going to make the difference. And you never know who is watching, you never know who is going to see it. If you continue to separate yourself like that, eventually the right people are going to see it and the right doors are going to open, as long as you present it the right way to people. Yes, you can let people see it, but if you put the right packages together and send it to the right people, there's always that 50-50 chance they might watch it, they might not. But the old adage is you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? The answer is always going to be no. Ask, what's the worst that could happen? Your answer is still no. But it might be yes. It might be a maybe. It might be maybe down the line, but not right now. Okay, you can check that off. I'm going to revisit this in 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, right? It's all about how you approach everything. I've always said the biggest haters, like I said before, are the ones that don't put in the work, right? Trust me, there's an old phrase in wrestling: tell a phone, tell a friend, tell a wrestler, right? You'll hear about something within minutes in our industry, right? I know those are out there that don't like me, and that's okay, right? I don't focus on that. I focus on the people who support me. I focus on the people who follow my journey. I focus on those people, not on the people that are not doing the work, right? Those are the individuals that are going to hate on you because maybe they ring announce 5 times a year and you're doing it maybe 5 times a month, right? So they're going to hate on you because you're getting more opportunities. Just tune out that noise. If you have goals for yourself, say to yourself, what is the end result you want to get to? And build short term goals leading up to that big goal. This is how many promotions I want to be at in 3 months. Here's where I want to be at in 6 months, 9 months. And then you just continue to build. It's like any job, right? If you want to get promoted, what do I have to do to get promoted, and what are those goals I need to reach in order to get to that level? So just stay focused on you. Don't worry about the negative people that are out there, because they're going to continue to bark, but there's really no bite.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Bravo.
I like to just see people just keep on barking. It actually I kind of get a kick
It's
out
kind
of
of
it.
amusing.
Yeah, and you know what it is, right? We're in such a social media driven world too, and I always say this to people too. You can read it and you can just keep scrolling. You don't have to respond, because again, sometimes if there are people that are interested in you in higher places, they will scour your social media. They will see your content. They will see what you're saying. So be careful of the comments you make, the words you use. Sometimes things can come back to haunt you. Um, but if you're also doing things in a character driven format, that's a different story too, as well, right? Everything's about the content we put out, and that's what people are going to look at.
Is that one of the biggest keys that maybe you give the students now, is just to be careful about what they're posting online now?
Yeah, because, and I can tell you this, right? I study so much about wrestling. Like it's a sickness to a degree, I guess, because I'm
Think about
always
it before I
learning.
fall asleep at
Can
night.
we say
Yeah.
obsession instead of sickness? I like
Yeah,
that
okay,
word a
yeah,
little
that's
bit
true.
better,
Yeah,
Sean.
it's an obsession, right? And I'm always interested in learning, right? So when I study, and I study a lot of the independents, because I like to know who's coming up. I like to know who's making a name where. If I ever wrestle them, I already have a clue about their persona and what we can do. But there's a difference in posting a highlight reel and then you're posting all this dumb stuff on your media that has nothing to do with wrestling, right? To me, if you're invested, your social media should be all of your persona, all of your character. At one time in the very beginning of Facebook, I had a personal page. And then when I realized half the people I know were following my wrestling page, I don't need the personal page anymore. Because to me, I'm a private person. My Facebook page had always been private to friends and family. Um, but I also understand, and I go back to the old days of wrestling, there should be mystique to the individual, right? If everybody knows about your personal life, you're not really special in a way, right? So for me, I don't really post much about my personal life, because privately, I am a private person. Character wise, this is what I do, so it can be out there for people to see. So 99% of my social media is literally all in character of things that I'm doing, promos, highlight reels, advice I might be giving because it's related to the industry, posting matches or clips or things that each other for that are showcasing what I'm doing on a story level. And then from time to time, I might post something personal, my dog, my relationship, but it's at various small increments. So to younger wrestlers, they use the social media content, because there are a lot of wrestlers out there, but a lot of them don't have a social media presence. Build a brand, right? Because you want people to know who you are. You want people to know what you're doing. And we all know perception is reality at the end of the day as well. So whatever content you can put out there, if it's fans or anybody else, if that's all they know, okay, they might believe, wow, this guy really doesn't like this guy, or wow, these two really are in like a blood feud, or things of that nature. But they don't know, because they really don't know. And the goal is to keep them guessing, right? It's no different than the stories that a WWE or an AEW present. It's all to get you to keep watching.
Shawn, you made several good points there that
Yeah, I jotted down a few too.
that I
Yes.
was taking out. One thing that you said that I wanted to kind of jump back to really quickly
Mhm,
while we're talking about, the social media presence, especially as
mhm.
an independent, up and coming independent wrestler, when you're building your own brand and you're
Mhm.
essentially trying to sell yourself to promoters. I
Mhm.
cannot tell you, especially as someone who has been kind of helping scout out some talent for the promotion that I'm ring announcing for in Massachusetts.
Mhm.
I cannot tell you how many people either don't have a strong social media presence, they don't have an Instagram or Facebook page, like they're
Mhm.
not easy to find, or
Right.
maybe people that don't post a lot, so like you don't really know a lot about them. Or then there's some people that post like a lot of the same thing over and over again, and some of it I will say is the highlight reels. I think this might have been at a camp that I had done with Dr. Tom last year.
Mhm.
I think we were talking about, as a wrestler specifically, like what to send to different promoters to try to sell yourself.
Mhm.
And I see a lot of people that post the highlight reels, which are cool, especially if it's just like a quick little thing for social media. But I think that a lot of people, they send out their highlight reels and it's like you said, the same big moves, the elbow drop and whatever, flying off the top rope. It's like the big moves, the big finishing moves.
Mhm.
But it's very, very different if you actually watch like a 5 to 10 minute match of theirs and
Correct.
see how they actually pace themselves and
Mhm.
like what kind of character work
Very big
are
on
they
that.
doing?
Yes.
Are they telling a story? So I was wondering if you could kind of elaborate on
Mhm.
that piece a little bit, because I feel like with the highlight reels, like you said, like they're cool for social media and it kind of gives people like a quick snippet of like who you are, what
Mhm.
your deal is, what you're
Right.
capable of. But in terms of really like selling yourself, like I
Mhm.
want to see,
What
uh,
you could actually do.
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
I want to
So
see if what your matches are like. Are you having an entertaining match from
right.
beginning to end?
Yes, and that is the biggest thing. And again, I when I coach my students or even talk to other talents, right? We talk about how everything is so easy at the fingertips today, at the click of a button, right? I try to tell young wrestlers, put yourself back before social media, right? How would you get your work in the hands of a promoter? Most of them can't answer that question because they grew up in this timeline. And not that it's a bad thing, right? Everyone's born at different periods of their career. I try to equate to them why it is so important today versus how guys like myself or even my tag partner Danny Moff coming up, how we had to do it, right? Think of all the hard work that has to go in yesteryear for me to be able to try and get work out of, let's say, the state of New Jersey. I used to have to, and I was taught, create a promo tape, 2 matches and 1 promo on a VHS tape, right? Now, go onto your typewriter or your early computer, go buy the Avery labels to label the spine and the body of the VHS tape professionally, then take an 8 by 10 like the one you showed earlier, which I had a Pro 8 by 10 of that made, and I had a resume printed on the back of it when resumes were big, and you had to now put that in a manila envelope and tape it up. Now you had to go buy the wrestling magazines because we're still in the infancy of social of internet, and you've got to find the addresses of where these promotions are. And if you couldn't find that, okay, well, it's in the envelope. Now I've got to go find where this last show was and see the address, and I got to drive there with the hopes of being able to at least meet the promoter, hand them the videotape, and it's still 50-50 as to whether or not that tape will end up in the garbage or in their VCR to watch, right? It's a lot of ground movement. So for talent today to have everything at their fingertips, utilize what you have, right? I actually learned this a couple of years ago where when I would reach out to promoters, I would have couple matches, a promo, all of that stuff ready to go. But I used to have to send everything little by little. Again, we talk about learning from everybody. Jordan Grace years ago posted on something about creating a Dropbox link where she had folders of everything to send. That way, when a promoter reviews everything, they have everything they need in one click. So you'd have a folder with maybe 2 matches. Have a short match. Have a 5 to 6 minute match. Maybe have an 8 to 10 minute match in case the promoter wants to see more. Have another folder with 1 or 2 promos. Have a babyface promo, have a heel promo, maybe have a vignette that you've done that explains your persona. Then have another folder, your contact information, your social media handles, and then another folder that has a couple of different promotional images in there. And then if you want, have a last folder with your theme music in there, or a Tron video with music in case they do decide to book you. Now they don't have to ask you for a promo photo. They don't need to get your music or Tron because it's already in that folder. And you have everything there at your fingertips to send to somebody. Dr. Tom had talked to me years ago when he was coming by my school and doing seminars with us. The amount of VHS tapes that they would get on a daily basis in Stamford was absurd. So they had a room where they would literally sit there for a few hours a day with a box full of tapes. They'd pop a VHS tape in, and they knew within 30 seconds whether or not to keep watching or hit eject and throw it in the garbage. The same still applies today. Make sure that you can grab their attention at whatever they look at within your first 30 seconds, whether it's the match, the promo, the vignette, the highlight reel, the promotional photo, or even today, yes, you can still create a resume. People are 50-50 about that, but don't do your resume with this graphic logo and all this. Give someone a professional resume that tells your experience and what you've done, not the championships you've won, not the names you've wrestled. Treat it like an actual business resume, because what you're really doing is you're auditioning for a job, right? You're interviewing for a job, whether it's at an independent promotion or Impact Wrestling or AEW or WWE. Apply real logic in real life to a quote unquote illogical world. If you do that, you'll catch more flies with honey than you will with vinegar.
Oh,
That makes sense.
yeah, no, it absolutely does. And it actually blows my mind, Sean, because literally I will talk to people at these shows where I'm doing interviews and they're like, oh, what are you booked on? Oh, nothing coming up. And then you look and there's zero promotion on their social media for any event. And it kind of blows my mind. Like I create a ton of content, like a ton of content, from wrestling clips to interview clips and stuff. And when people don't share the work that other people post of them, like doing stuff, like I feel like I promote shows more than some people who are on the show sometimes promote the shows, because it blows my mind. I'm like, I don't know why people aren't like more excited, like about like promoting the product that they're with sometimes.
I think, again, that comes down to, again, the individuals who are really passionate about doing this, or the ones that want to think it's cool to do, right? They're not going to put that effort into it. But yet some don't equate why they're not getting the work because they're not putting in the work, right? And it takes everything on all accounts. It's not just about training. It's not just about getting yourself out there, right? You have to do all of the other work behind the scenes, right? You have to stay in shape or get in shape. You have to invest in quality ring gear. You have to invest in a tanning membership to those that can tan. I know some people burn or whatever. Maybe some people are going for a vampire gimmick or whatever they're trying to do, right?
I've got my spray tan art, because you see, the lighting's not great, but I'm like very porcelain. I have my spray tan artist that I go to
Right.
every time I have a show or event.
Right. it's all about looking your best and being a professional in every category. And when you have, and I say this very nicely, when you have legitimate promoters out there that see you investing in that, it's going to make them want to take more of a chance on you as a performer, as opposed to the guy that just sends the Instagram message and just says, "Hey, I'm good, book me."
Yeah.
You know.
And I think another point that you made, Shawn, that I wanted to speak to a little bit was, again, like we've talked a lot about social media, and
Mhm.
Tony, you were mentioning like sharing information about shows and promoting the show on social media.
Mhm.
And I have to say, from some of the experiences that I've had, for example, promoting even merch, I think a lot of people, like I made a pro wrestling tees last year,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of performers that have pro wrestling tees, but they never talk about it. And when I made mine, I had a graphic made up by the
Mhm.
same designer that made the graphic for my t-shirt. And every so often, or whenever there's a sale or whatever's going on, I share it.
I saw
And
your advertisement today.
yeah, but I have to say,
Yeah.
sometimes people forget, but then
Mhm.
as soon as you share it, all of a sudden that's a new sale and that's money in your pocket. Or if you're
Absolutely.
promoting a show, all of a sudden you never
Yeah.
know who's going to see it on any given day. Maybe you
Correct.
share it one day, not a lot of people
Mhm.
see it. You share it another day, and all of a sudden, like all of the right people are looking at your story or your post or
Right.
whatever it is. So I have to agree with you. I think it's so important, and I think
Mhm.
that it also kind of ties back to some of what you were saying earlier about just like chains of events sort of leading you to be in the right place at the
Mhm.
right time. You never know with your social media who's going to see what, where, at what
Mhm.
time. And so I just think like I'm very active on social media myself, and I
Mhm.
just think that it's so important. And it's the other thing is it's free. You don't have to spend, you have
Mhm.
free advertising at your
Correct.
fingertips. And
If I can
and
give you one example of content, and why content is so important, because you never know who will see things. About a month or so ago, I was backstage at an AEW event doing some extra work, and I know so many individuals that work there. So when I go there, it's like meeting, it's like seeing old friends and just having conversations. There is a gentleman that works there that creates content. And he literally were just talking, and he said, "Hey man, I really love the story that you're doing right now. It transcends what you don't see on an independent level, is a long-term story that has layers, that feels like it's real." And we just talked about it, and it's thinking far ahead of what you're building to. And to get that kind of feedback and then to ask what I can do better, and him giving me some different points about where I know I want to go, and listening, again, it just goes to show you never know who's watching. People are seeing things, and you know how it's going to be interpreted. If you people don't know you have merchandise and you don't promote it, how can they invest in you and support you and buy it? I have a pro wrestling tee store. I can say I'm guilty. I may not promote it enough. And maybe for me, and I know we're in a different world, because I actually saw an interview that Matt Cardona did where he talks about promotion and merchandise, and I 100% agree with him. For me, being so invested in my persona and my character as a villain, I was always brought up and raised that the heels don't sell merchandise. They should never be seen before they walk out of the curtain. To me, that's just something of my flavor of what I live by. Um, that's just me. But I always tell anybody that's on shows, if you have merchandise, create a really nice setup at the table. If it's unique enough, people will at least walk by it And while you're there, that's your chance to be that salesman and promote your merchandise to make additional money on the event that you're at, and perhaps gain a fan, gain someone who's invested in you. That's also part of the promoting in our industry, is promoting yourself. Now, as a villain, I don't like to really be seen and things of that nature, but after shows, if I'm walking in my car and somebody wants to take a picture, I absolutely never say no. I will still try to stay in character a little bit, but I will never turn that down ever. And people do ask, and do you have merchandise? And yes, I'll tell them, I have a pro wrestling tee store. If you want to buy something, sure, go for it. But again, everybody handles their business differently in terms of how they commit to their character, their persona, who they are, things of that nature. So self promotion in this industry, like any other entertainment industry, is so important. And while I have it on the tip of my tongue, when it comes to promotion, right? Again, equating real life. In order for somebody to really get over with the audience, you have to have something unique as a persona, right? So many guys go out there wearing the shorts with the knee pads and the kick pads. Everybody does a super kick and a destroyer and a cutter and a dive and this and that. Promos are almost more important than the match itself. If you look at national TV, right? Sure, they're all great performers, but who are the consistent ones that get airtime to talk and get their personas over? I always talk to young performers as well. I'm not sure if you're both are familiar in the business world of what an elevator pitch is.
Vaguely
Yeah, no.
So
familiar.
an elevator pitch is basically the standard time of an elevator ride, bottom to top, is like 30 to 45 seconds. If you're in an elevator and the door opens and an executive walks in and says, "Hey, what do you do?" Can you tell them in 30 to 45 seconds what it is that you do in that company or for a living? So I ask young performers a lot of times, who are you in wrestling? What's your persona? Can you define who you are in 30 to 45 seconds? If you can, fantastic. You know who you are, so you know how to build your character. You know how your character would go food shopping, how they would work out at a gym, how would they talk to the person and say, "Hey, I need an oil change." If you can't do that, do you have a persona? Are you working on it? Are you working to define it, right? The best personas in wrestling are the ones that are always unique on shows. Wrestlers are a dime a dozen. Anyone can learn how to do a cutter, a Canadian destroyer, a super kick, a roaring elbow, whatever you have. But can you go into that ring? Can you walk through that curtain and captivate that audience the moment you walk out there? Can you interact with that crowd and let them know, if it's the first time they've seen you, that they don't like you? To a point where anybody could walk through that curtain, including the janitor, and they'll pop for them. That is the mark of being a true performer. We need more personas in wrestling, because that's what helps separate the shows. That's what helps define you from everybody else. Because you can still be a good wrestler, but can you have that character? And I'm always amazed by the world of wrestling today, where we do find unique characters that are out there, right? I'm sure you've worked with Gibke, right? That Dark
Yes.
STG character is so unique. It's different. I love working with him because there's so many ideas that I have. There's another gentleman out there that I saw who got pretty viral by the name of Luigi Primo. If you've never seen him,
Yeah.
right? He's unique. The guy tosses a pizza while he's in the ring in a move. It's unique. And then I say to myself, I want to work with this person. I want to create. To me, that's pro wrestling, right? You look at the greatest characters in wrestling: the Iron Sheik, Jake the Snake Roberts, Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, Sting, Vader, Cactus Jack, all these, they were good wrestlers, but they all had something unique that made them stand out above everybody else. That's what wrestling is. It's characters.
You actually said something in that last statement that segues perfectly into my next question. And it's a question that I ask most people that we have on the show, but I'm always curious to hear the response. I know you had mentioned Steve Gibkey, you mentioned some other folks on the independent scene. Is there anybody that because you've had a pretty extensive career and you've gone toe to toe with a lot of different people. Is there anyone that you haven't had the opportunity to step in the ring with yet, whether they're on the independent scene or whether they're signed anywhere, that you would love the opportunity to work with, that maybe you'd like to use this opportunity to call out?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them. It's funny. I actually have a short list that I keep in my phone that I can check off if the opportunity ever arises. But I love working with young independent talent today because there's so much there to explore. They're so young, but I know they want to go. And then there are some experienced individuals that are out there. And again, a couple of names that I'm just coming to my mind. I'm not getting them off my list, right? You have a guy that's been around for years, like a Joey Janela. We've been in tons of locker rooms, but we've never worked one-on-one. Joey is batshit crazy, and I know what we can create. If I look at younger independent talent, right? A kid coming up who has everything right now, Spencer Slade. Amazing.
I would
Just
pay money to see that.
I'd
love to renounce that.
A great talent that I follow that I think has so much upside in this industry. You look at guys that have just recently been ID'd by WWE. I've been in some locker rooms with a Marcus Mathers and some of those great guys. One guy that I really want to fight, who has been around for a long time, who's mainly based out of Texas, out of Booker T School, and Reality of Wrestling, is Ryan Davidson. The man is just literally the same style as me. And I want to create on such a physical level. There's so many talents that are out there. There's guys that I've known that I've always wanted to mix it up with. I've only gotten to work with him in a 6-man, was actually supposed to work him on that show in a singles, but was supposed to work with Jacob Fatu, did not come to fruition. But I've wanted to work with guys like Hammerstone. I've worked with a Richard Holiday, tremendous talent. I want to work with everybody on every level, because it just keeps me going. For me, like I always say, yes, I'm on the back end of my career as far as in ring, because there's always so much your body can handle, but I'm also not ready to give it up yet. So when I see really awesome young talent, it makes me want to step up my level even further.
It's real. The one tidbit I got out of there was Marcus Mathers, and I saw him wrestle twice when I went up to Philadelphia, New Jersey for Mania weekend. I saw him wrestle Effie, and then I saw him wrestle Nick Wayne at a block party up there. And Marcus Mathers was absolutely incredible.
He is awesome.
Such a talented guy. And I do want to circle back to one of the things he said about, creating characters, and just an example that I saw last weekend. I was at Deep South Wrestling down here in Georgia, which is Nick Patrick owns down here. And it was a free event. So it was at a bar. So people were just walking up off the belt line, coming up. And I'm standing there at ringside recording footage, and some guy's standing next to me. And he's sitting there watching the match. He has no clue what's going on. He just kind of, for the first time. And James Storm is in the ring. And he's like, man, this dude is incredible. And I'm like, oh yeah, like he's a legit OG. Like he's made a big name for himself. But what really got me was like the one match he was really invested in was August Artois versus Stunt Marshall. And because of the personas that these two guys have and the way that they were giving him shit, like
Right.
mocking him outside the ring.
Yep.
He was asking me, who are these guys? And I'm like, no, you got to go and go check out their merch. And they're at the
Right.
booth during intermission. And those two guys really pulled in this fan who knew, not even a fan, this
Right.
bystander who's just there to have a beer into the show. And I really believe that if wrestlers do have that strong of a character, persona, and ring work, the whole package, man, you can turn a non-wrestling fan into at least an intrigued wrestling fan very quickly.
Yes, I put him over to the moon so much, and one guy that I had like a year-long feud with, he goes everywhere, is a guy by the name of CPA.
I've
He's
seen CPA actually perform up here
he
recently.
is the most awkward tax man, but it's just the crowd just resonates with him. He is such a unique person behind the scenes, which translates in the ring. And again, when you have two distinct personalities and you're in a match, you literally are easy to put together. What would this person do against this person, and how does it look legitimate? And if you do it the right way, any fan that is a first timer or a hardcore fan will get invested, and they will suspend their disbelief to watch. And again, like I said before, that's what pro wrestling is. It's unique personas, unique characters mixed with an array of athletic ability.
And you actually mentioning CPA, because I know he has like a very specific character, but it's something that I think also resonates a lot with like just millennial, like corporate culture.
Yes.
There was someone else that I had to bring up, and I don't know if either of you are familiar with his work. He's only 22 years old, but he is also someone that has just like an extremely captivating, fun gimmick and just gets over with the audience like that. It's a young man named Jermaine Marbury. And his gimmick is all centered around basketball. So, like, he's billed from Rucker Park, New York.
Yep.
His ring gear is like his own personalized jersey. He has a mascot, Benny the basketball, that comes out to the ring with him. And he has all of these little nuances that he incorporates into his performance that for example, one of my brothers is a huge basketball fan, and he's come to a couple of the shows that Jermaine was booked on. And he loved like this crossover between wrestling and basketball, because there were also all of these little tie-ins to things that if you're like a diehard basketball fan, you pick up on all those little things.
Right.
So if I don't know if either of you are familiar with his work, he's also just a great athlete in the ring, but I would highly encourage, he might be somebody that you would be interested in stepping in the ring with, Shawn, if you haven't had the opportunity.
I have seen his work. He's tremendous. So yeah, that would be, again, I'm so open to working with any and everybody. I'm not one of these guys that's like, oh, I've been doing this for a long time. Maybe I'll work this guy, not that guy. I want to work with as many talents as possible, because I just love to create and do what's asked of me on a show, and be able to provide even some ideas and feedback of, hey, maybe we can do it this way. I think it might get a better reaction. But again, it's just all about creating, and that's what our industry is about, right? Young performers, I see a lot of times they go into putting matches together, as we talked about it before. They put the matches together because they just want content to create a highlight reel, as opposed to putting the match together for the paying audience in whatever position that they are being put in on the card, because every card is supposed to build to a main event. Yes, I understand the mentality of wanting to go out and steal the show and things of that nature, and there's nothing wrong with that to a degree. Go do that, as long as it helps contribute to building to what that main event is on the show. But absolutely go out there and create and use that character that you have to tell that story with the other character and say, this is what we're going to present to them tonight. And hopefully, if it's done the right way, you'll get that ultimate reaction.
Hmm. I've definitely got two non-wrestling related questions for you that
Sure.
kind of circle back again from the beginning here, because you talked
Sure.
about growing up. And
Mhm.
again, there's two things that I'm also a nerd for that you
Mhm.
mentioned as well too, and that's comic books and trading card collecting. So
Mhm.
what does a Shawn Donovan trading card collection look like or looked like at one point?
So yeah, I have stopped collecting that many years ago. I don't really collect much anymore. But from a comic book perspective, I was very big into X-Men when I was very young as a kid. Small tidbit. At one point, I had a collection, a complete run from issue 46 all the way to 198. I actually consigned it to an auction house back in 1999, and I used the money because I always wanted X-Men #1. And I used that money to bid in that same auction to buy an X-Men #1 that is professionally graded. And it wasn't worth much at the time. It was worth something, but thanks to the explosion in comic book movies, I have a nice little pretty penny saved. When it comes to trading card collecting, I was very big into the NBA as a kid, as a teenager. Part time, I actually worked for a year at a sports collectible store, and the gentleman who owned it, we would open up and we would break packs, and because you want to get the inserts to sell the high value ones. And in 1996, there was a young rookie by the name of Kobe Bryant who had an awful year, and he didn't want those cards around. So he would a lot of times let me hold on to and take a lot of cards. And at one point, I had a pretty decent collection of Kobe Bryant rookies, which I ended up, when PSA became very big, sent them all out. Got some good ones that are a nice grade right now that, again, will contribute to myself down the line whenever I want to get rid of them. But that was a lot of collecting for me back in the day. It was very comic books and NBA cards. And it's funny you say that because I was actually digging through stuff about a year ago and didn't realize the amount of wrestling autographs that I actually have, and finding out that the old original WWF promo photos that would be given to talent at autograph signings to give out, those are actually worth more money signed and even unsigned because they are not produced anymore. And the amount that I have original signed, and I look at the values on eBay, I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why is this worth so much? But they are. And when I think about it, a lot of them are unfortunately deceased and passed away. Um, One thing that's really cool that a lot of people don't equate is, and I know Tommy Fierro does this now with his 80s wrestling con and 90s wrestling con that he holds. The mid to late 90s were very big for wrestling conventions because WWF talent on their off days were allowed to do independent shows and partner with vendors to do autograph signings. And wrestling collectible conventions used to be very big. And I got to learn about Japanese wrestling very early on before I even became a wrestler, because there was a gentleman by the name of George Mayfield who used to go to Japan, get a lot of merchandise, come back to the US and sell them. So that's where I first got exposed to New Japan Pro Wrestling, All Japan Pro Wrestling. And to me, not realizing it until now, they the photographers in Japan at that time were on a very different level. And they used to create these like encyclopedias with Japanese talent, WWF, ECW, WCW talent, that I had an encyclopedia that was called American Rana. And I was looking through it at one point, in that encyclopedia, I have 130 autographs in that book, and 40 plus of them are now deceased. Not where I'm going with that, but the level of what being a fan is and how it can translate your love of wanting to be a wrestler. When I look back at that stuff, it just reminds me of where I came from and how much I love this industry and what it did for me personally. As I mentioned before, being that young kid that was bullied and was not really the most outgoing person, you couldn't hurt me when I watched pro wrestling. Just like when I'm inside of a ring, you can't hurt me on any level. Yeah, the bumps hurt, but it's a way for us to be able to also get out of that, whatever's going on in the real world, and be able, whether you're a fan or a performer, to just take time away from that and be able to enjoy what you love on every level. And I think pro wrestling allows that for people very differently than the sports world, because we can invest in those characters. We talk about the Attitude Era. How many people invested in a Stone Cold Steve Austin? Because who didn't want to stand up to that tyrant boss, right? You can literally put yourself in that position. So it's really fun to go back and look at a lot of that stuff and kind of see where everyone's journey comes from. But just knowing that it all equates and circles back to the love of, what we're talking about is that crazy world of professional wrestling.
Yeah, it's like growing up, I was again, when people say, how long you been watching wrestling? I say, well, whatever day I came home from the hospital, my dad had wrestling on. So that's how long I've been watching professional wrestling. And I remember, growing up, again, I was Attitude Era ish, a
Yeah.
little bit before that in 8th grade. And a recruiter came to recruit people for high school, again, Catholic school. And there was just me and one other guy that liked wrestling. My dad would take us to the matches, and, we love professional wrestling. And the recruiter came and they're like, oh, we have football, we have basketball, we have wrestling. And we looked at each other. We're like, oh my God, they have wrestling. They have wrestling. And I'm like, oh yeah, I want to talk to you about this wrestling thing. Like, what
Yeah.
is it? Then we find out, of course, it's like collegiate wrestler or high school, And I said, well, if I can't go stinger splash somebody, I'm not really interested in that.
I was the same way. I did 1 year of amateur wrestling in high school, and I'm like, I want to body slam somebody. I don't want to just do like these takedowns, but
No.
but I understand exactly where you're coming from.
Shawn, I had to share when you're talking about like your fandom as a child. So to date myself a little bit, so I'm a 90s baby, and I remember when I was a kid, it was like when the video games were kind of like a new thing. Like there was, of course, No Mercy on N64. Like we all loved that game. Like the SmackDown games for PlayStation were just coming out. And I remember when they came out with General Manager mode, I literally had a notebook. I still keep my notebook with all my notes because I'm that type of person. I had a notebook where I would run one of the shows. I think my brother always took Raw, so I got SmackDown. So I would always run SmackDown. I had a notebook where I kept like all of my matches, all of my feuds. Like I outlined all of the stories that I had going on. And it's so funny because similarly to how you said it, I feel like that fandom as a child very much translates into the person that I am and that I'm kind of becoming in the business today. And so I just think it's so funny, like when you mentioned looking back on where we all came from. And something else that I wanted to ask that I do ask in a lot of the interviews, and this is pivoting just a little bit, and then I have a fun question for you afterwards. I guess out of people that you have wrestled already, because like we've mentioned, you've had a pretty extensive career. I know you talked about people that you haven't wrestled yet. Are there any matches in your career or opponents in your career that really stand out as being like career changing matches or people that you feel like you really gained a lot from, that stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, to me, anytime you get to wrestle someone that has been somewhere and has done something on a bigger scale, you always want to pick their brain before and after the matches. When I think about it in like recent times, one pivotal match for me in my career was being able to work my current partner, Danny Moff.
Ah,
When he and I were teaming and he got signed to Ring of Honor, he was signed to an exclusive contract, which means he could no longer do the independents. His last match, he chose me to wrestle him in the Rahway Rec Center, which is the Madison Square Garden of Independence, in my opinion. There's so much history in that building of places that ran there. And just being able to have that match with him, um, and knowing that Danny likes to, if you give him a time, he's kind of like a crowbar these days, where crowbar can just go for an infinite amount of time. And that match for me was very pivotal on a personal and a professional level, because that match opened a lot of people's eyes on me. At that point, I've been doing this 19 years and always been, I consider myself a journeyman and more of a utility player, where I'm a chameleon. I can put myself in any position needed, but was never kind of really looked at to a degree as a main player. And that match, put me on the map for that, and what I've now done in the last number of years in the ring and other places. But so that's one match where I really learned a lot and really gained something from, being able to do some promo segments with Jake Roberts and Ted DiBiase really helped me a lot in terms of character and taking things to another level and keeping a story going, and just picking their brains at being able to wrestle Haku is a feat in itself. And even though it was a tag match, he said, I want to be the one that takes the heat. Me and Danny are looking at like, okay, it's going to be 5 minutes. Match was darn near 30 minutes.
wow.
And what I learned from him in there was, how do I put this? You have to treat what's going on inside the ring is real. I remember grabbing Haku in a front face lock, and the sheer strength of this man, like I literally had to fight to bring him back to our corner of the ring. And then again, being able to pick his brain afterwards, and him being so gracious. If you talk about anybody that is the opposite of their in-ring persona, he is the sweetest individual. And I think the last one, again, tag team wrestling, being able to work with the Rock and Roll Express is just, you don't even have to lock up, and the crowd is just going nuts. And you start to learn how to build without even having to touch. And I learned so many things from each of those individuals uniquely. And in that sense, again, saying to young performers, when you get to work somebody more experienced, pick their brains unequivocally until you're ad nauseum, because you may not know when you'll be able to pick their brain again. Get as much as you can out of it.
We've talked a lot
And then,
about great opponents and
Mhm.
great moments and just, great learning experiences. But again, one of the questions I like to end with as well,
Mhm.
too,
Sure.
is a bizarro moment. The
Mhm.
one I like to use. I've heard crazy situations of like fan interactions or just something that happened in the ring, or
Mhm.
you just look around and you're like, is this real life? Did this just really happen? Is there like a bizarro moment that stands out to you, Shawn?
Man, there's a couple of them. I'll give you two quick ones. Number one, very early on, Blue Meanie, if obviously you know who he is, he
Which is
ran a
bizarro in himself, right?
yeah, such a unique individual, such a lovable man. I love him to death. He ran a promotion for a short period of time called 3PW. Got a chance to work on one of his shows because they needed two people to go in and do like a 6-minute match because they were going to have somebody that they were trying to label as a new, if you remember the character in ECW 911.
Right. Okay.
They want him to come out and destroy us. I'm a year into the industry. And it was at the ECW arena in what I coined the original ECW arena before it was remodeled, run down, just, yeah. So me and this individual, we're a year into the business. So we're thinking, look at all the guys on the show. There's a lot of former ECW individuals on the show. Okay, let's try to do Dean Malenko and Eddie Guerrero. Yeah. You remember how the old ECW guys and those fans would chant if there were things that were messed up or they just weren't buying you. I mean, they were crapping all over us. And of course, we're just going to continue with the script and whatnot. We get through the match. That's one bizarro moment, but it continues the rest of the night. On the show at that time was also New Jack, the Rottens, Ian and Axel, Public Enemy, and not that I really want to bring his name up. He was not a good individual and had a very horrible ending. Gentleman by the name of Rockin' Rebel. If anybody knows the name and what ended up happening to him, I won't even say it, but you can look it up on your own. Rockin' Rebel was not the nicest individual and just hated everybody. He was supposed to wrestle New Jack on that night. They're both watching the match from the crow's nest that had at the ECW arena. The Axel Rotten and Ian Rotten match, they wrestled the Public Enemy. And they wanted to recreate the famous chair spot where everybody threw all the chairs in the ring. The match was a bloody mess. And that's kind of New Jack's gimmick. Rockin' Rebel is throwing a fit as Ian is walking into the locker room with a $5 bill stapled to his forehead. EMS people are helping to clean them up. Guys are supposed to be having a good time or whatever. Rockin' Rebel starts an argument with them. And then it leads to almost a locker room brawl. Tables are being flipped over. Guys' bags are being knocked over. New Jack used to carry a legitimate machete with him. He's now pissed that Rockin' Rebel has him all riled up. Everybody's arguing, and I'm this young kid in this locker room trying to just get dressed, and I want to watch the rest of the show. The bizarro moment is I'm here. New Jack's probably about 4 feet, 5 feet behind me. He just literally takes the machete and just throws it all the way across the room at Rockin' Rebel. And you just see everybody just fly, like just getting out of the way as Sabu's table gets knocked over with his gear now, and it's literally becoming an almost locker room brawl. And the bizarro moment for me is, what am I doing here? I don't belong here. And how do I get out of here as fast as humanly possible? I didn't even say goodbye to anybody. I don't even know if I was even supposed to get paid or not. I just got my stuff and I left. And even to this day, that is probably the most bizarro moment I think I've ever been in wrestling. I mean, I've had a few times where, like, in my character, I've challenged fans and they've tried to get in the ring, but simple stuff, but nothing compares to the chaos of what this locker room was, more so because of the personalities that were in that locker room that were so well known. And me being a year in, I'm still kind of a fan. I'm learning the business, happy to be here. And I'm like, maybe this industry is not for me. Maybe I'm not cut out for it. And I literally just bolted out the side door with my stuff as soon as I got changed. I could not have gotten out of there fast enough.
Shawn, I think you just set the bar for bizarro stories up here. I don't think we're going to hear anything else in any other
Yeah.
Oh my
interview that
goodness.
top.
No,
Yes.
you
No,
might.
I was going to say with Julie, when somebody says, "Oh, I tripped over my shoelaces in the ring," I'll be like, "No, Shawn had
Be
a
like, no,
machete."
that's fine.
A New Jack. No. Tripping over your
Oh my
shoelaces
goodness.
doesn't account to anything anymore.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was a very, very interesting experience. That's for sure.
Oh, well, thank you, Shawn, for sharing that story. That
On a lighthearted note, I had one last final question that was just
Sure.
kind of intended to be fun, because you had mentioned his name earlier in the interview,
Mhm.
and I actually worked with him this past weekend with
Mhm.
Steve Gibkey. Who would you rather wrestle, Jersey Steve Gibkey or Spooky Steve Gibkey?
Oh, that's a tough one. You know what? I love and hate Steve at the same time because we work out together sometimes, and I love and hate the workouts he puts me through. I've wrestled both. Um, it's interesting because I wrestled Steve at a very early point in his career, but then wrestled Dark STG in what I would probably say is his prime of that persona right now. As long as Steve is not wearing the NSYNC pants that he likes to wear, sure. I think for me, character wise, I prefer the Dark STG character just because I think there is, at least with what he's doing there, there's more depth. And I think there's more to play around with that character, and what we've already done in matches, from a character standpoint to what he would do and how I would react in those situations. Yeah, I would probably have to say the Dark STG character, but nonetheless, I will always give high praise to Steve because he's one of those guys that, while still young, was brought up in the industry and learned the right way from the right people. So he automatically gets it. Working him is a night off, but it's also still a challenge within that character of what can we do differently that the people didn't see last month.
That's a great answer. And I know we've been talking for, it looks like, over an hour and a half here. So I know we're getting towards the end. Usually, to wrap things up, one thing that I always like to ask people to put themselves over and plug what they're doing.
Mhm.
Where can we see you next, and where can the people find you on social media?
Sure. So social media, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I am on Twitter, but not as much. I've just not become a fan of Twitter over the last year. But Twitter and Instagram, both my feeds are Shawn Donavan 01 for the year that I started. Facebook is just Shawn Donavan. People can find me, all across the US and different places that I'm going to. I don't go as many places these days. I'm really focused on coaching and doing backstage work. And really trying to help get my tag team with Danny Moff out in more different places. But the main companies that I work for are WrestlePro, which is my home, ISPW. I'm now doing some work in New York with We Are Wrestling. Um, I've been in some conversations with some other places that I won't name yet. I'll wait for people to pop up, but that's where you can find me at most. The other thing that I'm doing now that people can find is I have started a podcast with my tag partner, Danny Moff, and independent wrestling veteran, Darius Carter, podcast called Card Subject to Change. It is available on YouTube on the My Fandom YouTube page. But if you search for us on Instagram and on Facebook, we have a page called Card Subject to Change Podcast. We just recorded episodes 6 and 7, so it's still very new, but it's a new podcast in the world of wrestling that I think differs from a lot. It's just the three of us sitting at a round table. Yeah, we've got a bottle of whiskey or something there to help, get the blood flowing, but we just pick a topic and we just have a general conversation about our experiences in the industry, what we feel can be better, what we think is lacking, really just trying to provide advice and give back to the world of wrestling for young wrestlers, even experienced wrestlers that may want a different take on something, but also fans can watch and get a little bit of insight to what actually goes into being a performer. And yes, sometimes we get a little hot at the subjects because we're just so passionate about things. Um, but we like to have a good time and we just laugh and we talk. We try to keep it to about an hour per episode, something that we're really just trying to venture and see if it goes somewhere or not. But just trying to find a way to continue to give back in the industry, to those who want to learn. And then, if people who are living in the Northeast area have an interest in wanting to be a professional wrestler, I am one of two trainers at the Create a Pro New Jersey Wrestling School. The other coach is LSG, Leon St. Giovanni. The school is owned by AEW VP Pat Buck. So if people would like to get a foot in the door in the industry and they're in the New Jersey area, please come on down and check us out, and we'll give you all the goods on how to sign up and follow your dreams to become a pro wrestler.
So much good stuff going on there. Yeah, definitely, guys. Follow Shawn Donavan and all his cool stuff he has going on, the podcast and the wrestling events. And I'm sure you will be happy to whip some young recruits into shape too when they come out to find out what the wrestling biz is all about.
Would love to, man. I absolutely love coaching students. I have such a great time with our crew. I put some music on to make sure that they're keeping their vocals up. And we just, we go through it, fun drills, but everything is a learning experience for everybody.
Oh, awesome. Julie, what cool stuff do you have coming up?
Well, we just had our season finale up here in Massachusetts for the promotion that I primarily ring announce for, which is Rebel Spirit Pro Wrestling in Marlborough. We are getting ready to release some of that footage imminently, which I'm super excited to share on social media. And we'll also be announcing the information for our next show imminently as well. I have some exciting stuff on the calendar. I was just at CCW last month, hoping to make a return there and get back to Florida sometime soon. And I am also going to be debuting for a relatively new promotion in New Jersey in 2025. It's called Fight Factory Wrestling. We are going to be announcing the show for that at some point in the near future. I know it is on the calendar for February, but I will wait for them to announce all of the nitty-gritty details. And you can follow me on social media. On Instagram primarily is where I'm the most active. It is at the Crown Jewels. Crown is with an E at the end. The old English spelling. That's just how we roll here. And again, Shawn, I just wanted to thank you so much for your time. I know this is something that we've been wanting to plan for a little while now. And like I said at the beginning of the interview, I'm just a big fan of yours in the sense of I really appreciate all of the information that you give to young performers and just everything that you do to give back to the business as well. So thank you so much, because I feel like I got so much out of this interview just as a young performer myself. So this was awesome. Thank you.
No, thank you guys for having me. Anytime you ever want me back, just let me know. I love to talk shop. I appreciate the kind words, and getting to follow your journey a little bit. I'm a big fan as well, because you have a unique presence, you have a unique look to yourself, and you continue to do what you're doing. I'm sure I'll see you at Fight Factory when you debut there. It'll be nice to kind of put a face to the name at this point, at least in public and in real life, not through a video screen, but just
Yes.
continue with that journey. Continue getting to Florida, get to Jersey, continue going everywhere, and just showcase your brand. If you're that invested, trust me, it will build.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, Shawn. Thank you, Julie, again for coming on and co-hosting with me for us here on Tone In Entertainment. We got 4 more interviews to drop still from the past 2 weekends, plus 2 highlight videos from Action Wrestling and Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling. And December is going to be crazy. We got more Action Wrestling. We got more Deep South Wrestling. We got more Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling. And February, we might just all be seeing each other. That's all I'm going to say for right now. So, Julie and Shawn, again, thanks for your time. Thank you. Guys, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that red subscribe button so you can stay tuned in here to Tone In Entertainment for future videos. Subscribe to the channel. Do it. Go now. Do it now.